Have you ever noticed that the harder you chase something, the further away it seems to slip? You work tirelessly, visualize daily, affirm constantly, yet somehow your dreams remain frustratingly out of reach. What if I told you that your very effort, the struggle you've been told is necessary, is actually the invisible cage keeping you trapped in the life you're desperately trying to escape? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into one of the most counterintuitive truths about manifestation and reality creation, a truth that will completely flip everything you thought you knew about getting what you want. Now, here's something that might sound absolutely insane at first. Every morning, you wake up determined to change, to improve, to finally break through. You create vision boards, you repeat affirmations, you push yourself harder than ever before. And every night, you fall into bed exhausted, still wanting, still waiting, still wondering why nothing has shifted. Has this ever happened to you? Because if it has, you're about to discover why your struggle itself has become the problem. You see, there's a fundamental misunderstanding at the core of how most people approach manifestation and personal transformation. We've been conditioned since childhood to believe that success requires effort, that change demands struggle, that we must fight our way to a better life. Society has drilled into us this equation: more effort equals more results. But what if this entire framework is not just incomplete? What if it's fundamentally, catastrophically wrong? Here's the paradox that nobody talks about. Wanting something is actually a confession that you don't have it. Every time you desperately desire, every time you intensely crave, every time you anxiously chase, you're broadcasting a signal to the deepest part of your mind, the part that actually creates your reality, that you are lacking. And that subconscious mind, like a faithful servant, simply reflects back exactly what you're telling it. I don't have this. I am without this. I am separate from this. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Stay with me here, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. You've been taught that you're a small human being trying to manifest from a vast external universe, that there's a you here and a universe out there, and your job is to somehow convince that universe to give you what you want. But this entire model is built on a lie. What if you're not separate from creative power at all? What if you are the universe, dreaming itself into infinite expressions? Every single time you say, I am tired, I am broke, I am alone, you're not describing reality, you're creating it. Those two words, I am, are the most powerful creative force available to human consciousness, and most people are using them to cement the very conditions they're trying to escape. The question becomes, if your consciousness is the creative power itself, then why has nothing changed? Why do you still feel stuck? The answer lies in understanding a truth so radical, so different from everything you've been taught, that it requires you to completely surrender what you think you know about manifestation, effort, and change. And that's exactly what we're going to explore together. Now, here's where most people get completely lost in their transformation journey. They've tried visualization techniques, affirmation practices, meditation apps, manifestation journals. They've collected an entire arsenal of tools, yet nothing seems to work consistently. And when one method fails, what do? They search for another technique to add to their collection, another guru to follow, another system to implement. But the hidden truth nobody wants to hear is this: you don't need more techniques, you don't need another method. What you need is to subtract something that's been there all along, blocking everything. Think about it for a moment. You wake up every morning and immediately step into the role of someone who wants, someone who needs, someone who lacks. You carry this identity with you throughout the entire day, the person who doesn't have their dream life yet, Who's still working toward it? Who's trying so hard to get there? And this is the invisible barrier that's been sabotaging every single effort you've made. Because wanting, by its very nature, is a confession of absence. The moment you deeply want something, you're actually declaring to your subconscious mind that you don't have it. And your subconscious, being the faithful servant it is, simply reflects this truth back to you in your external reality. If this resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to explore together, and by subscribing, you become part of a community actively practicing these principles rather than just thinking about them. The missing piece isn't another practice you need to master. It's the removal of this wanting self. It's learning to exist as the person who already has, rather than the person who desperately desires. This shift in identity changes everything, but it can't happen through willpower alone. It can't happen through conscious effort during your waking hours, because your conscious mind is too busy defending its current story, too invested in maintaining the familiar patterns that define who you think you are. So where does real change actually occur? Here's something that will shift your entire perspective on how manifestation works. The 2/3 of your life spent awake is merely witnessing what was already determined in the 1/3 you spend asleep. Your days don't create your reality, they reveal it. All those hours you spend working, planning, strategizing, pushing, they're simply the stage where the play unfolds. But the script was written in those precious moments as you drift from waking consciousness into the subconscious realm, in that threshold state where your critical mind releases its grip and your deeper mind becomes receptive to new impressions. This is why people can work 18-hour days and still feel stuck. This is why you can hustle endlessly without seeing real progress. Because the real work, the only work that actually matters in terms of creating lasting change, happens in a state you've been overlooking completely. Every night, you have access to the most powerful creative chamber in existence, that space between waking and sleeping, where your subconscious mind is open, where new patterns can be impressed, where your future reality is actually being constructed. But most people waste this opportunity completely, falling asleep in the same state of lack, worry, and frustration they carried all day. Now, I want to go even deeper into this because understanding where creation happens is one thing, but knowing how to consciously use this threshold state to reshape your entire life is something else entirely. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to understand this," if what I'm sharing is starting to click for you, because what comes next will show you exactly how to work with this creative threshold in a way that finally produces real, tangible results in your waking life. Let me share something with you that completely transformed how I understood this entire process. There's an ancient story that most people read as religious history. But when you understand it as a psychological blueprint for consciousness, everything changes. It's the story of Elijah and the widow's dead child. Now, before you think I'm getting too mystical here, stay with me, because this narrative holds the exact formula for resurrecting any dream that's died in your life. The widow in this story represents you, every person who's carried an unfulfilled desire for so long that it's become lifeless. Maybe you once had burning passion for a dream, genuine belief that something amazing was possible for you, but over time, after countless disappointments and setbacks, that dream lost its vitality. It became a corpse you're still carrying around, something you think about but no longer truly believe in. The dead child represents every wish that once breathed with possibility but now lies cold and still in your consciousness. And Elijah? He represents something extraordinary, the God power that exists within your own awareness. Not some external force you need to beg or convince, but the creative authority that lives in your own consciousness, waiting to be activated. This part of you has the ability to breathe life into anything, but most people never access it because they don't know it exists. They spend their entire lives looking outside themselves for solutions, for opportunities, for someone to save them, when the resurrection power was always an inside job. Here's where the story reveals its deepest truth about transformation. Elijah didn't try to revive the child where it died. He carried it to an upper room. This detail is everything. You cannot resurrect a dead dream while dwelling in the same state of consciousness that killed it. You cannot revive your lifeless desires while remaining in the mental basement of despair, impossibility, and limitation. The upper room represents an elevated state of consciousness, a higher frequency of awareness, where what seemed impossible below suddenly becomes inevitable. Every single time you assume the feeling of your wish already fulfilled, not hoping it will happen, not wishing it would happen, but feeling as though it has already happened, you're ascending to that upper room. You're lifting your consciousness out of the circumstantial, evidence that says it can't be done, and entering a state where it already is done. This is the space where real transformation occurs, where dead dreams come back to life, where the impossible becomes possible. But here's what most people miss completely on this journey. They try to do this work while still entertaining all the reasons why it won't work. They attempt to elevate their consciousness while simultaneously inviting doubt, fear, and the memory of past failures into the room with them. It's like trying to perform surgery in a contaminated environment. The resurrection cannot happen when you're bringing the infection of "but what if" and "it's never worked before" into your sacred creative space. Now, I want to show you exactly what happened in that upper room, because the specific actions Elijah took reveal the precise mechanics of how to breathe life back into your dead desires. Write in the comments, "I'm elevating," if you're seeing how this ancient story is actually a manual for your own consciousness, because understanding what happened next will give you the exact method for transforming any area of your life that feels stuck or lifeless right now. So, what did Elijah do once he reached that upper room? The scripture tells us something crucial. He closed the door behind them. He shut out everything. The widows weeping outside, the village gossip, the medical facts, the evidence of death. All of it was excluded from that sacred space. In that private chamber, there was only Elijah and the dead child, only the creative power and the lifeless dream. Nothing else was allowed entry. This is the revelation that changes everything about how you approach your desires. The reason most people fail isn't lack of technique or insufficient belief. It's that they never close the door. They try to resurrect their dreams while simultaneously entertaining every argument against them. They attempt transformation while keeping one eye on their bank balance, their relationship status, their current limitations. They bring all the noise and evidence into the very space that must remain pure for creation to occur. This is precisely why the nighttime becomes your most powerful ally in this entire process. When you lie down in darkness, you have the natural opportunity to close the door on everything. You cannot see your empty bank account in the dark. You cannot hear the critical voices of doubting family members. You cannot feel the weight of your current circumstances pressing down on you. In that private sanctuary of your own consciousness, before sleep claims you, you have complete freedom to be, to have, to experience anything you choose, without the external world interfering with your creative authority. But here's where most people completely miss the point of this practice. They think the work is about begging, pleading, or desperately visualizing what they want. They lie there trying to convince themselves, repeating affirmations they Don't believe forcing images into their mind. That's not what happened in the upper room at all. Elijah didn't pray for the child to live. He didn't visualize life returning. He didn't beg God to perform a miracle. The scripture says something far more profound. He lay upon the child and breathed into him. What does this mean? He didn't breathe air. He breathed awareness. He breathed the feeling of I am. He became so fused with the state of the child being alive that there was no separation between Elijah and the living child. He didn't observe life returning from a distance. He became the life itself. This is the hidden mechanic behind all genuine transformation. You must stop being the person who wants something and become the person who already has it. Not in your actions, not in your words, but in the feeling tone of your consciousness. When you lie down tonight, your task isn't to imagine having what you want while simultaneously feeling the lack of it. Your work is to so completely merge with the state of already having it that the distinction between imagining and experiencing dissolves. You breathe into your desire, not hope, not wishful thinking, but the awareness of this is. You fuse yourself so intimately with the feeling of fulfillment that you forget you were ever without it. This is how dead dreams resurrect. This is how impossible situations transform. This is the breath of life that only you can give to your own desires. Now, the question becomes, how? Do you actually do this in practical terms? How do you move from understanding this concept intellectually to experiencing it so completely that your external reality has no choice but to conform? Put in the comments, I am becoming, if you're recognizing that this isn't about getting something external, but about shifting who you are internally, because what I'm about to share will give you the exact method for making this fusion a living experience, rather than just an interesting idea. Let me tell you a story that illustrates this principle perfectly, because sometimes the most profound revelations come from real-life examples. Back in the winter of 1933, Joseph Murphy found himself in New York City with absolutely no money and a burning desire to spend the season in Barbados with his family. This wasn't a casual preference. It was a deep yearning to feel the warmth of his homeland, to see the people he loved, to escape the cold grey streets he was trapped in. But the facts were completely against him. No savings, no wealthy connections, no logical path to making this journey happen. He went to his teacher, a man named Abdullah, and laid out his entire situation. He explained the impossibility of it all, presented every rational argument for why this desire would remain unfulfilled, and Abdullah's response shocked him completely. He simply said, "You are in Barbados." Not, "You will go to Barbados," not, "You can manifest a trip to Barbados," but "You are in Barbados." Present tense, absolute certainty. Murphy was confused, even frustrated. He tried to argue, to clarify that no, he was clearly in New York, not Barbados. And Abdullah simply repeated with unshakable conviction, "You are in Barbados." That night changed everything because Murphy finally understood what his teacher meant. The distinction wasn't about physical location, it was about where he was dwelling in consciousness. And this reveals the entire secret that most people completely miss in their transformation journey. There's a massive difference between thinking of something and thinking from something, and this difference determines whether your desires remain fantasies or become your lived reality. Hit the like button if you feel this was time well spent. It helps this message reach others who need to hear it, and your like becomes part of the bridge that connects them to this understanding. When you think of something, you're positioning yourself as separate from it. You're here in your current circumstances with all your limitations, and the thing you want is over there, somewhere in the distance, in the future, in the realm of possibility. You're the observer looking at your desire from outside it. You're seeing yourself getting it, moving toward it, hoping for it, and this very act of observation, this sense of separation, is a confession that you don't have it. Your subconscious mind receives this message loud and clear. I am without this. I am apart from this. I am not this. But when you think from something, everything shifts. You're no longer observing your desire from a distance, you're occupying it. You're not looking at your dream home from the outside, admiring it from the street. You're sitting in your living room, looking out the window at the view you wake up to every morning. You're not watching yourself in a fulfilling relationship like viewing a scene in a movie. You're in the relationship, hearing your partner's voice, feeling their presence beside you, experiencing the natural comfort of being loved. You're not witnessing success from the perspective of someone who hopes to achieve it someday. You're living from the position of someone who already has it, making decisions from that reality, feeling what it feels like to be that person right now. Murphy spent that night and every night after not trying to get to Barbados, but being in Barbados. He didn't see mental pictures of the island from New York. He experienced Barbados as his present reality. He felt the tropical air, heard the familiar voices of his family, saw New York as something distant and past. He occupied the state so completely that within a month his brother sent him a ticket and money, seized by an inexplicable urge to gather the family together. Now, I want to show you exactly how to make this shift in your own life, because understanding the concept intellectually is one thing, but actually moving from thinking of to thinking from requires a specific approach. Drop in the comments. I am shifting perspective if you're beginning to see how you've been approaching your desires from the wrong position, because what comes next will give you the precise method for occupying your desire rather than observing it. The impact of what Murphy did that month is extraordinary when you really think about it. His brother was thousands of miles away, completely unaware of Murphy's desire to visit Barbados. There was no phone call, no letter hinting at this wish, no manipulation or suggestion planted in his brother's mind. Murphy simply occupied a state in his own consciousness, and the entire external world, including people who had no knowledge of his inner work, rearranged itself to match that state. His brother was what we call a bridge of incidents, the means through which the universe delivered what Murphy had already claimed in consciousness. This reveals something profound about how reality actually operates. You're not sending thoughts out into space, hoping they'll magically attract circumstances. You're not trying to manipulate external forces through positive thinking. What you're doing is far more fundamental. You're shifting the state from which you're operating, and when that state changes, everything and everyone in your life automatically adjusts to reflect it. The world is a mirror, and it can only show you what you're showing it through your dominant state of consciousness. Now, I want to share something even more dramatic that demonstrates just how powerful this principle becomes when applied to seemingly impossible situations. There was a young man who received what amounts to a death sentence from his doctors. He was diagnosed with an incurable disease and given 3 months to live. Medical tests confirmed it, specialists agreed, and everyone in his life had already begun the process of mourning him before he was even gone. His wife's eyes were constantly red from crying. His children sensed the shadow hanging over their home. The presence of death had already moved in, not physically yet, but in everyone's consciousness. Murphy taught him something radical. Instead of accepting the diagnosis, instead of fighting the disease, instead of hoping for a miracle from outside himself, this young man was instructed to occupy a different state entirely. Every single night, as he lay in bed, barely able to speak, he was to see his doctor's face, not delivering bad news, not offering sympathy, but wearing an expression of complete shock and amazement. He was to hear his doctor say over and over, "It's a miracle, it's a miracle," not as something he hoped would happen, but as something he was experiencing right now in his imagination. The key was feeling it as real, not pretending, not wishing, but actually experiencing the reality of his doctor's incredulity at his recovery. He was to feel the naturalness of health, the certainty that something unexplainable had occurred, the relief of hearing those words. And his wife was instructed to do the same, from her perspective, seeing her husband strong and well, living their life together as though the crisis had never happened. They both practiced this faithfully, and within months the impossible occurred. The disease that should have killed him simply stopped, reversed, vanished. His body, which had been reflecting the state of death, began reflecting the state of life, because that's what he occupied in consciousness every night. Now, what's crucial to understand here is that this wasn't about denying reality or pretending the diagnosis didn't exist. It was about recognizing that the diagnosis itself was simply a reflection of a previous state, and states can be changed. Write in the comments, states can shift if you're seeing that your current circumstances aren't permanent fixtures, but reflections of where you've been dwelling in consciousness. Because understanding this changes your entire relationship with what you call reality. Here's what makes this entire process so beautiful and so liberating. The law that governs all of this responds only to consciousness. It doesn't judge you. It doesn't evaluate whether you're worthy. It doesn't care about your past mistakes, your current bank balance, your education level, or whether you consider yourself spiritual or not. This creative principle operates with the same impersonal precision as gravity. When you step off a ledge, gravity pulls you down regardless of whether you're a saint or a criminal, wealthy or broke, educated or illiterate. It simply responds to the conditions you create. The same is true for the law of consciousness. It responds to your assumptions, to the states you occupy, to the feeling you carry as you drift into sleep. That's it. There's no cosmic judge deciding who deserves their desires and who doesn't. There's no divine committee reviewing your application for a better life. The entire mechanism is simpler and more mechanical than most people realize. Whatever state you assume and maintain becomes your reality. It's as reliable as mathematics, as consistent as electricity flowing through a circuit. This means that your transformation journey isn't about becoming good enough or pure enough or enlightened enough to earn your desires. It's simply about understanding how the mechanism works and using it consciously instead of unconsciously. Most people use this law against themselves every single day, assuming limitation, lack, and impossibility, and then wondering why those things keep showing up in their experience. But the law itself doesn't care what you assume. It just faithfully reflects it back to you in physical form. Now, this brings us to understanding why sleep holds such extraordinary power in this entire process. Sleep isn't just your body shutting down to rest after a long day. Sleep is the doorway into the creative chamber of the universe itself. And when ancient texts speak of heaven, they're not describing some distant location in the sky with golden gates and angels. They're describing a state of consciousness that you can enter every single night. Heaven is the state where you're no longer bound by what your senses tell you, where you're no longer imprisoned by current circumstances, where you're no longer limited by what seems possible based on your past experience. In that drowsy state between waking and sleeping, you have complete freedom to be anyone, to have anything, to experience any reality you choose. The critical mind that argues with you during the day, that reminds you of your limitations, that tells you all the reasons why something can't happen, that voice grows quiet as you approach sleep. This is why the most successful practitioners of this principle have always emphasized the importance of the state you carry into sleep. Because in those moments, you're passing through a threshold into a realm where anything is possible, where your imagination has free rein, where new patterns can be impressed upon the subconscious without interference from doubting thoughts. What you feel as real in that threshold state becomes the seed that determines what grows in your waking life. The revelation here is that you've been given access to this creative chamber every single night of your entire life, but you've been wasting it. You've been falling asleep worried about tomorrow's problems, replaying today's disappointments, rehearsing the same old story of limitation that you've been living. And then you wake up surprised that nothing changes. Put in the comments, "I'm claiming my nights," if you're understanding that the most powerful creative work doesn't happen during your busy days, but in those sacred moments before sleep takes you. To understand how this mechanism actually works behind the scenes, there's a beautiful metaphor that makes everything click into place. Think of your conscious mind as the husband and your subconscious as the wife in a creative partnership. The husband's role is to select, to choose, to decide what he wants to focus upon and impress upon his partner. The wife's role is to receive that impression, conceive it in the darkness of her inner chamber, nurture it, and eventually give birth to it in physical form. Together, these two aspects of your mind create every single circumstance you experience. Nothing in your life exists outside of this partnership. Your job, your relationships, your health, your financial situation, all of it was conceived through this union of conscious selection and subconscious creation. But here's where most people completely misunderstand the process and sabotage their own transformation. They try to make the husband do the wife's work. They attempt to force manifestation through conscious effort alone, through willpower, through pushing and striving and demanding that reality change. But the husband cannot give birth. That's not his function. His job is simply to select the desired state and plant that seed clearly and firmly into the receptive subconscious. Then he must trust his partner to do what only she can do. Take that seed into the darkness, nurture it in ways he cannot see or control, and bring it forth into manifestation at the perfect time through the perfect means. When you understand this dynamic, you stop exhausting yourself trying to make things happen through sheer force of will. You start working with the natural creative process instead of against it. And here's the crucial decision point that determines everything. When does this impregnation occur most effectively? When are the husband and wife most intimately connected, most able to create together without interference? In that drowsy state as you prepare for sleep, when the conscious mind releases its tight grip and the subconscious becomes deeply receptive. This is your creative moment. This is when the seed is planted. This is when tomorrow's reality is being determined. The mood you carry into this sacred threshold becomes the seed itself. If you fall asleep feeling victorious, your subconscious conceives victory. If you fall asleep feeling defeated, she conceives defeat. If you fall asleep feeling loved, she conceives experiences of being loved. If you fall asleep feeling lonely, she conceives more loneliness. She doesn't argue with what you give her. She doesn't say, "But the facts suggest otherwise." She's completely impersonal, completely faithful. She simply takes whatever impression you bring and gives it form in your waking life. This is why it's absolutely critical that you never, and I mean never, go to sleep feeling discouraged or dissatisfied. Never take the disappointments of your day into that bridal chamber. Never allow the failures, the frustrations, the fears to be the last thing you feel before consciousness fades. Because whatever you take in during those final moments before sleep, she will bring out as the conditions of your tomorrow. You're literally seeding your future with the feeling you fall asleep in. Most people have been doing this backwards their entire lives. They spend their day trying to stay positive, trying to think good thoughts, trying to maintain high vibration, but then they collapse into bed exhausted, replaying everything that went wrong, worrying about tomorrow's challenges, feeling the weight of their current circumstances, and then they wonder why nothing ever changes. Write in the comments, "I'm protecting my sleep state," if you're realizing that those final moments before sleep are too precious to waste on worry and disappointment. Now, here's something that confuses almost everyone who starts working with this principle, and getting this clarity can completely transform your entire approach. When we talk about feeling your wish fulfilled, most people immediately think of emotion, excitement, happiness, joy, enthusiasm. They think they need to get themselves worked up into a state of intense positive emotion before falling asleep. But that's not what this is about at all. In fact, if you're feeling that kind of excitement, it's actually a sign that you haven't yet achieved the state we're aiming for. Let me explain what feeling really means in this context. Think about something you know to be absolutely true about yourself. Your name, for instance. When someone asks your name, how do you feel about it? You don't get excited. You don't feel emotional. You don't need to convince yourself or build up enthusiasm. You simply know it with a deep, settled, natural certainty. There's no question, no doubt, no need for proof. It just is. That quality of knowing, that unforced sense of certainty. That's what we mean by the feeling of the wish fulfilled. It's not a temporary high that you have to manufacture and maintain through effort. It's a quiet, stable sense of, this is simply who I am and what I have. It's the feeling you have about things you take completely for granted. Your ability to see, your heartbeat, the roof over your head. These things don't generate excitement because they're so naturally part of your reality that you don't even think about them. That naturalness, that taken for granted quality, is exactly what you're aiming to achieve with your desire. Here's the test that reveals whether you've truly assumed your wish in consciousness or whether you're still operating from a state of wanting. If you still feel excited about your desire, you don't yet have it in consciousness. Excitement is a signal of future expectation, not present possession. It means you're still looking forward to something rather than living from it. Think about it. Do you feel excited about things you already have and experience every day? Of course not. The excitement fades once something becomes your normal reality. When your wish truly becomes natural in your consciousness, when it shifts from something special and exciting to something obvious and normal, that's when you know you've achieved true possession in imagination. It's the difference between a new homeowner who's excited about their house and someone who's lived there for years and barely notices it anymore. Both own the house, but only the second person has that settled, natural relationship with it that doesn't require constant emotional reinforcement. This is actually good news for your transformation journey because it means you don't have to maintain some exhausting state of forced positivity. You don't have to pump yourself up emotionally every night. What you're cultivating is something much deeper and more sustainable. A quiet, natural sense of course this is my reality, why would it be otherwise? When you reach that state where your desire feels so normal that you're almost bored by it, that's paradoxically when it's closest to manifesting in your physical experience. Now the question becomes, how do you cultivate this sense of naturalness rather than excitement? How do you move from the temporary high of wanting something to the settled certainty of having it? Write in the comments, "I'm seeking naturalness," if this distinction is clicking for you, because understanding the difference between excitement and settled certainty changes everything about how you'll approach tonight's practice. There's another layer to this work that most people completely overlook, yet it might be the most powerful factor. Determining what shows up in your life. I'm talking about your inner speech, those silent conversations you have with yourself all day long, not the words you say out loud, but the constant mental commentary running in the background of your awareness. This inner dialogue is creating your reality far more than you probably realize. Think about what happens throughout your day. You imagine conversations with people who criticized you, rehearsing what you should have said. You mentally argue with your boss, your partner, your circumstances. You worry about what might go wrong, playing out disaster scenarios in vivid detail. You criticize yourself, telling yourself stories about why you're not good enough or why things never work out for you. All of this inner speech, every single silent word, is a creative command being sent to your subconscious mind. When you rehearse an argument in your imagination, you're not just passing time, you're summoning that conflict into being. When you imagine someone criticizing you, you're actually writing the script they'll follow. When you worry about problems, you're investing creative energy into manifesting exactly what you fear. Your subconscious doesn't distinguish between what you want and what you don't want. It only responds to where you're placing your attention and what you're feeling as you do so. Your inner conversations reveal the state you're actually living in, regardless of what you claim to want. This is why mastering your inner speech becomes absolutely crucial on this transformation journey. The blueprint your subconscious uses to construct your reality comes directly from these silent conversations. If your inner speech is full of complaint, you'll experience being wronged. If it's full of fear, you'll encounter danger. If it's full of lack, poverty will be your lived experience. But here's the revelation that changes everything. You can deliberately construct mental conversations that imply your wish is already fulfilled. There's a profound teaching that came to Murphy's wife one morning, a voice of authority speaking within her consciousness saying, "You must stop spending your thoughts, time, and money. Everything in life must be an investment." This distinction between spending and investing is transformative when you truly understand it. To spend is to waste, to squander, to lay out without return. To invest is to lay out for a purpose from which a profit is expected. Your thoughts are not neutral. They're either being spent wastefully or invested wisely. When you worry, you're spending your thoughts on outcomes you don't want, squandering your creative power on fears and limitations. When you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you're investing your thoughts, laying them out for a purpose from which a definite return is expected. Every moment of your day, every second of mental activity, you're either spending or investing. You're either wasting your creative currency or using it to build the life you desire. This applies to your time as well. Time spent dwelling in dissatisfaction, replaying failures, rehearsing limitations. That's wasted time, spent time, time that produces nothing of value, time invested in occupying the state of the wish fulfilled. Even just brief moments throughout your day pays dividends in your actual experience. Even your money follows this principle. Money spent from fear creates scarcity. Money invested with confidence creates abundance. Drop in the comments, "I'm investing my inner world." If you're seeing how every thought, every inner conversation, every moment of attention is either building or destroying your desired reality. Now let me give you the practical method for tonight, because understanding principles is valuable, but knowing exactly what to do when your head hits the pillow is what actually creates transformation. You need to construct a scene, but not just any scene. This has to be a specific moment. That implies your wish is already completely fulfilled. And here's the crucial distinction most people miss. You're not imagining the process of getting what you want. You're not visualizing the journey or the steps or the moment of receiving. You're constructing something that could only occur after your desire has already become your normal reality. Let me give you some examples so this becomes crystal clear. If your wish is to be married, don't imagine the proposal or the wedding ceremony. Instead, imagine something mundane that would happen months or years after you're married. Lying in bed at night, turning to your spouse and casually saying goodnight, feeling the comfortable familiarity of having been together for a long time. Notice how that scene implies marriage without showing the wedding itself. That's what we're after. A wedding ring on your finger implies marriage. A key to your new house implies ownership. A conversation with your financial advisor implies wealth. The I scene itself is simple, but what it implies is enormous. Keep your scene short, just a few seconds, a single moment that you can repeat and loop in your imagination. You're not creating a movie with multiple acts and scenes. You're creating a snapshot with movement, something so brief and specific that you can experience it fully, then experience it again, deepening the feeling each time. The power isn't in the length of the scene, but in what it implies and how real it feels to you. But here's where most people sabotage themselves completely. They construct their scene and then watch it like they're viewing a film. They see themselves in the scene from outside as if a camera were filming them. This keeps you in the position of observer rather than occupant, and we've already established that observation is separation. You have to enter the scene. You have to be in it, not watching it. See through your own eyes, not through a camera's lens. If someone is speaking to you in your scene, hear their voice as though they're standing right in front of you. If you're shaking someone's hand, feel the grip, the warmth, the pressure. If you're sitting in your new home, feel the chair beneath you. See the view from your perspective. Notice the details of the room from inside your own experience. Move with your own hands. Touch things and feel the texture. Speak with your own voice and hear it from inside your head, not as if you're listening to a recording. Make it vivid by engaging. Every sense you can. What do you smell? What's the temperature of the air on your skin? What sounds are in the background? The more sensory details you add, the more real it becomes to your imagination. And the more real it becomes to your imagination, the more readily your subconscious accepts it as an actual experience rather than a fantasy. Your subconscious doesn't differentiate between a vividly imagined experience and a physically lived one. Both create the same impression. Both plant the same seed. Now there's a specific way to work with this scene that makes all the difference between a mental exercise and an actual creative act. Write in the comments, "I'm entering my scene," if you're ready to learn how to loop this moment in a way that dissolves the boundary between imagination and reality. Because what comes next is the technique that turns this understanding into lived experience. Once you're inside your scene, experiencing it from your own perspective with all your senses, engaged, you begin to loop it. You experience it once, fully, feeling every detail, then you experience it again and again. But here's what's crucial. You're not mechanically repeating it like reciting multiplication tables. You're repeating it with feeling, with naturalness, as though you're remembering something that actually happened rather than imagining something that might happen. There's a specific moment you're working toward, a shift that occurs if you persist with this practice. Something changes in your consciousness. The scene stops feeling imaginary. It begins to feel like a memory. You reach a point where you can no longer clearly distinguish between this imagined experience and memories of things you actually lived through. When this happens, when that boundary dissolves, you've done it. You've planted the seed. Your subconscious has accepted the impression as real, as something that has already occurred, and she will now work to manifest the physical equivalent of what you've impressed upon her. This is why we repeat the scene, not to convince ourselves through sheer repetition, but to deepen the feeling each time until it crosses that threshold from imagination into felt reality. Some nights this happens quickly, other nights it takes longer. The important thing is to persist gently, without strain, allowing the scene to become more natural, more familiar, more real with each repetition. You're not forcing anything, you're simply dwelling in the experience until it becomes as solid to you as any memory of your past. And here's what most people get wrong when they first start practicing this. They think the goal is to stay awake and visualize for as long as possible, maintaining this scene through sheer willpower and concentration. That's not it at all. The goal is actually to fall asleep while in the state of the wish fulfilled. You want to drift off during the scene, carrying that feeling into sleep with you. This is the perfect outcome, not a failure of concentration. When you fall asleep during your scene, you're delivering the impression directly into the subconscious without any interference from your conscious mind. You're planting the seed in the most fertile soil possible. So don't fight sleep. Don't try to stay alert and aware. Let yourself drift. Let the edges of consciousness grow soft. Continue your scene even as your awareness begins to fade. And if you slip into sleep while still experiencing it, you've achieved exactly what you were meant to achieve. The feeling you carry across that threshold from waking into sleeping is the creative command. That's the seed. If you fall asleep with the satisfaction of your wish fulfilled lingering in your consciousness, that feeling continues working even after you lose awareness. Your subconscious receives it and begins the process of bringing it into form in your waking world. This is why the ancients called sleep the door into heaven, because in that transition, you're entering the realm where all things are possible and seeding your future reality. Now, what you absolutely must avoid is breaking the spell in those final moments. Don't suddenly open your eyes to check the clock. Don't let your mind wander to tomorrow's problems. Don't break the feeling by returning to your current circumstances. Protect that state like you would protect something precious and fragile. Write in the comments, "I'm falling asleep fulfilled," if you're understanding that the goal isn't to stay awake visualizing, but to carry the feeling of fulfillment across the threshold into sleep itself. The morning after your first night of practice, you're going to face a temptation that sabotages more people than almost anything else. You'll wake up and immediately want to check for evidence. You'll look at your circumstances to see if anything has changed. You'll scan your environment for signs that it's working. You'll search for proof that your imagination actually created something real. And this checking, this searching for validation, is doubt wearing a disguise. Think about what you're actually doing when you wake up looking for evidence. You're confessing that you're not sure it worked. You're admitting that you need external confirmation because you don't fully trust what happened in your imagination. You're stepping out of the state of someone who already has their desire and back into the state of someone who's waiting to see if they'll get it. And in that moment of checking, you undo the very work you did the night before. Here's a truth that will save you enormous frustration on this journey. The subconscious works in darkness. You cannot see the process happening. You cannot track the progress. You cannot measure how close you are to manifestation by examining your current circumstances. Seeds germinate underground in the dark, invisible to the eye. A farmer who plants corn doesn't dig up the seeds every morning to check if they're growing. He knows that disturbing the process would destroy it. He plants, he waters, he trusts, and he waits for the harvest to appear in its own time. Your work is the same. You plant the seed at night through your imaginal act. You water it by maintaining the assumption during your days, but you must trust the process to unfold in ways you cannot see or control. The morning after, simply carry the quiet assumption that it's done, not hoping it will be done, not checking to see if it's becoming done, but knowing with settled certainty that it is already done in the only place that matters, in consciousness. Your external world will catch up in its own time. And here's something beautiful about how this actually works in practical terms. Your subconscious will choose what we call the bridge of incidents, the most natural path to bring your imaginal fact into physical reality. You don't need to figure out how your desire will manifest. You don't need to plan the steps or orchestrate the circumstances. In fact, trying to control the how actually interferes with the process. Your job is simply to assume the end, to occupy the state of the wish fulfilled, and let the means take care of themselves. This bridge might look completely unexpected. A brother you haven't spoken to in months might suddenly reach out with an opportunity. A stranger might approach you with information that changes everything. A door you thought was permanently closed might swing open. A series of seemingly random events might align in a way that leads you exactly where you need to be. The subconscious is infinitely more intelligent than your conscious mind. She knows paths you cannot see, connections you haven't considered, possibilities that never occurred to you. Your conscious mind might think, I need to get that job by applying to this specific company and impressing this specific person. But your subconscious might manifest that same fulfilled wish through an entirely different path. Maybe a friend mentions you to someone, maybe a position opens up that didn't exist before, maybe the perfect opportunity finds you rather than you finding it. Trust the process. Your only concern is the end, the feeling of already being where you want to be. Leave the journey to the intelligence that knows how to turn acorns into oak trees. Put in the comments, I trust the bridge. If you're understanding that your job is to assume the end and release all concern about the means, letting the subconscious orchestrate the perfect path in ways your limited conscious mind could never plan. Now let me address something you're absolutely going to experience when you try this tonight, and knowing it's normal will keep you from giving up prematurely. Your mind is going to wander. You'll start your scene fully engaged and present, and then suddenly you'll realize you're thinking about tomorrow's meeting or replaying an argument from last week or wondering what you should make for dinner. Your attention will slip away to worries, plans, random thoughts, memories, all the usual mental noise that fills your consciousness. This is completely normal. In fact, it's inevitable for anyone who hasn't trained their attention. Your mind has been wandering freely for your entire life, jumping from thought to thought without direction or discipline. Now you're asking it to stay focused on one specific scene, to dwell in one particular feeling, and it's going to resist at first. It's like asking someone who's never exercised to run a marathon. The capacity has to be developed gradually through practice. But here's what's crucial. When you notice your attention has wandered, don't get frustrated with yourself. Don't judge it as failure. Don't start a whole internal dialogue about how you can't do this, or how your mind is too chaotic, or how this technique won't work for you. Simply return to the scene. Gently, patiently, without any drama, bring your attention back to the imaginal experience. Each time you do this, each time you notice wandering and consciously return, you're actually strengthening your attention. You're training the muscle of focused awareness. Every return is a victory, not a failure. In fact, the whole practice could be described as noticing you've wandered and returning, noticing and returning over and over again. That is the practice. The strengthening happens in the returning, not in never wandering at all. So expect it, welcome it even, because it gives you the opportunity to exercise this crucial capacity for directed attention. And here's another challenge you'll face that needs to be addressed directly. You might try to force the feeling. You'll lie there straining, trying to manufacture the emotion of fulfillment, pushing yourself to feel what you think you should feel. This approach never works. Feeling cannot be forced. When you try to impose emotion through sheer willpower, it remains artificial, superficial, unconvincing to your subconscious. It's like trying to fall asleep by commanding yourself to sleep. The very effort prevents the natural occurrence. The feeling you're after arises naturally when you truly dwell in the scene, when you relax into it, rather than straining toward it. It's about letting go, not holding on. It's about trusting, not controlling. If the feeling isn't coming, the solution isn't to try harder. It's to relax more deeply. Soften your body. Release your grip on how you think it should feel. Stop judging whether you're doing it right. Just be in the scene, experiencing it as fully as you can in this moment, and let whatever feeling arises be exactly what it is. Sometimes the feeling will be strong and obvious. Other nights, it will be subtle, barely perceptible. Both are valuable, both are planting seeds. The power isn't in the intensity of the feeling, but in the naturalness of it, in the degree to which it feels real rather than forced. A quiet, genuine sense of already having is infinitely more powerful than manufactured enthusiasm that collapses the moment you stop pushing. Write in the comments, "I'm allowing, not forcing," if this distinction is helping you understand that the real work is in gentle dwelling rather than strenuous effort, because this changes everything about how sustainable and effective your practice becomes. There's one more obstacle you need to be prepared for, and it's the one that causes most people to abandon this practice before it has a chance to work. After a few nights of faithful practice, you'll wake up and look at your life, and nothing will have changed. Your bank account will look the same. Your relationship status will be unchanged. Your health, your job, your circumstances, all of it will appear exactly as it was before you started. And a voice in your head will say, "See, it doesn't work. This is just fantasy. You're wasting your time." This is the moment where most people quit. They conclude that the technique doesn't work, that they're doing it wrong, or that they're somehow the one person for whom this universal law doesn't operate. But here's the truth. The law always operates. It has never failed and will never fail. What fails isn't the law, it's persistence. What fails is the willingness to continue assuming the end when the senses scream that nothing is happening. Remember the farmer planting his corn. He doesn't dig up the seeds after 2 days to check if they're growing. He doesn't abandon his field after a week because he can't see shoots yet. He understands that growth takes time, that the process is happening beneath the surface, even when nothing is visible above ground. He continues to water, to tend, to believe, because he knows the nature of seeds. He knows that if he's planted correctly and maintained the right conditions, the harvest is inevitable. It's only a matter of time. Your assumption is a seed. Every night you fall asleep in the wish fulfilled, you're watering it. Every day you maintain the quiet certainty that it's done. You're tending it. The fact that you can't see visible results yet doesn't mean nothing is happening. The subconscious is working in ways you cannot perceive, arranging circumstances, aligning people, opening doors, creating the bridge of incidents that will deliver your desire into your physical experience. But this process has its own timing, and your job is simply to persist, regardless of what your senses tell you. Let me give you a concrete example that demonstrates the power of persistence. There was a middle-aged banker who came to Murphy completely trapped in his career. He'd reached a ceiling with no possibility of advancement. His superiors told him directly that nothing could be done. If he was unhappy, he should look elsewhere. But he had a family to support, children in school, and starting over seemed impossible. His secret dream was to manage investment funds for a large institution, but he had no connections in that world, no obvious path to such a position. He was taught this exact technique. Every night, without exception, he was to feel as though he had just completed one of the most important days of his career, the day he accepted his dream position with exactly the kind of institution he longed to work for. Not hoping for it, not trying to get it, but feeling the satisfaction and relief of having already closed the deal. He practiced faithfully, night after night, occupying that state before sleep claimed him. Within 2 months, a director from one of the wealthiest foundations in the world contacted him completely out of the blue. Would he be interested in joining the foundation in an executive capacity handling investments? The position was everything he had imagined. Today, he lives the life that once seemed impossible, not through networking or luck or any logical chain of events, but through the persistent assumption of his wish fulfilled, transforming into physical. In fact, Write in the comments, "I'm persisting," if you're committing to practice this faithfully, regardless of how long it takes, because that commitment to persistence is what separates those who transform their lives from those who just think about it. Now, there's a powerful technique that can dramatically accelerate your transformation, and it addresses something most people never consider. Before you plant new seeds each night, you need to prune the garden of yesterday. Otherwise, the weeds of your past experiences will choke out the flowers you're trying to grow. This is called revision, and it's one of the most transformative practices you can add to your nightly routine. Here's something that might sound impossible at first. Your past is not fixed. I know everything you've been taught says the past is done, over, unchangeable, carved in stone. But the past exists only in your memory, and memory is malleable. The event that seems so real, so solid, so permanent, it's just an impression in consciousness, and impressions can be changed. Every negative experience you had today planted a seed. If you fall asleep with those memories intact, those seeds will germinate and produce similar experiences tomorrow. But you have the power to change those memories before you sleep. Before you enter your wish-fulfilled scene each night, take a few minutes to review your day, but don't review it as it actually happened. Review it as you wish it had happened. Did someone speak harshly to you? Revise it in your imagination. Hear them speaking kindly instead. Did something go wrong at work? Revise it. See it going smoothly. Did you feel embarrassed or rejected or criticized? Rewrite the scene so you felt respected, accepted, appreciated. You're not denying what happened. You're pruning it so it doesn't continue creating in your life. The subconscious doesn't distinguish between a revised memory and an original memory. Both are simply impressions. When you revise an experience, you change the seed that was planted, and a changed seed produces a changed harvest. This is true forgiveness, not pardoning someone while still holding the memory of what they did, but actually changing the memory so that in your consciousness it never happened that way at all. Let me share a perfect example of how powerful this becomes in practice. There was a woman whose employer made her life absolutely miserable. He criticized her constantly, humiliated her in front of colleagues, found fault with everything she did. Every day at work was a battle, and every night she came home exhausted and bitter. When Murphy asked about her inner conversations with this man, she admitted that every morning on her way to work, she held long mental arguments with him, defending herself against accusations he hadn't even made yet, rehearsing conflicts that hadn't happened. She was creating the very behavior she despised through her own inner speech and unrevised memories. Murphy instructed her to revise every difficult encounter before she slept, hearing him congratulate her instead of criticize her, feeling him treat her with respect instead of contempt. She was also to change her inner conversations throughout the day. No more mental arguments, only conversations of harmony and appreciation. Within 2 weeks, his behavior transformed completely. Same man, same job, but suddenly he was kind, supportive, complimentary. Nothing external had changed except her inner world, and he had no choice but to reflect that change. Now, you might be thinking this sounds like manipulation or denial of reality, but it's actually the opposite. It's recognizing that others are mirrors reflecting your own consciousness back to you. And when you change what you're projecting, the reflection must change. Write in the comments, "I'm revising my past," if you're ready to stop carrying yesterday's negative impressions into tonight's creative work, because revision combined with assumption is an incredibly powerful combination for transformation. There's something else you need to understand about this journey, and it might save you from unnecessary discouragement. You're probably going to want to share this with people in your life. Friends, family, maybe your partner. You'll be excited about what you're learning and practicing, and you'll naturally want to talk about it. But here's my advice. Be very selective about who you share this with. In fact, in most cases, don't share it at all until you have results to show. The reason is simple. Most people don't understand this principle, and many will actively try to talk you out of it. They'll tell you you're being unrealistic, that you need to face facts, that imagination can't change reality. They'll mock you for believing in what they consider fantasy. And while their skepticism can't actually stop the law from working, the law operates whether anyone believes in it or not. Their doubt can infect your consciousness if you're not careful. It can plant seeds of uncertainty that undermine your assumption. Your assumption doesn't require anyone else's agreement. You're not taking a vote on whether your desire is possible. You're not conducting a survey to see if others think this will work. You're occupying a state in your own consciousness, and that state will manifest regardless of what anyone else thinks about it. But protecting that state, especially in the early stages when it's still fragile and new, means guarding it from voices that would tear it down. Think of it like protecting a newborn plant from harsh weather until it's strong enough to withstand the elements. The best teacher is demonstration anyway. When people see your life transform, some will become curious and ask questions. Those who are ready will want to learn. Those who aren't ready will dismiss it as luck or coincidence. Either way, your job isn't to convince anyone. It's simply to live the principle and let the results speak for themselves. Now, there's one question everyone asks when they start practicing this, and it's important to address it directly. How long will it take? When will my desire manifest? People want a timeline, a schedule, some guarantee of when they'll see results. But the subconscious doesn't operate by clock time. It operates by what we might call imaginal time. The time it takes for your assumption to become so natural, so inevitable feeling, that the outer world has no choice but to conform. Some manifestations appear within hours of the first practice. Murphy knew people whose desires materialized almost instantly. Other situations take weeks or months. There's no fixed formula because several factors influence the speed. The depth of your impression matters. A shallow, half-hearted assumption takes longer than a deep, fully felt one. The strength of your opposing beliefs matters. If you've spent years assuming poverty, one night of assuming wealth won't immediately overcome that momentum. And the naturalness of the bridge of incidents matters. If your assumption requires dramatic, unlikely circumstances, it may take longer than one that can be fulfilled through ordinary, everyday events. But here's what's crucial. Giving up all concern about timing. The moment you start wondering how long, you're confessing that you don't yet have it. In the wish fulfilled, there's no wondering about timing because it's already done. Put in the comments, I'm releasing the timeline, if you're understanding that your job is to persist in the assumption, regardless of how long it takes. Trusting that the perfect timing is being orchestrated by an intelligence far greater than your conscious mind's need for immediate gratification. Another question that comes up frequently is about multiple desires. People want to know if they should work on one thing at a time, or if they can assume several wishes fulfilled simultaneously. And here's my guidance on this. Start with 1. Choose the desire that burns brightest in your heart, the one that would create the most significant impact in your life if it were fulfilled. Don't scatter your attention across 5 different wishes during these early stages of practice. Scattered attention produces scattered results, or often no results at all. When you're trying to assume health and wealth and love and success all at once, you dilute your creative power. You're like someone trying to dig 5 shallow holes instead of one deep well. Focus creates power. Concentration amplifies impact. Choose the one desire that matters most right now and give it your full attention every night until you've mastered the feeling of having it, until it's become so natural to you that you can call it up effortlessly. Once you've established that first assumption firmly, once it's become a stable part of your consciousness, then you can add another, and then another. But don't rush this process. what you'll often discover is that the feeling of one wish fulfilled begins to transform your entire life in unexpected ways. A woman who assumes the feeling of being deeply loved might find not only romantic opportunities appearing, but also her friendships deepening, her family relationships healing, and even professional opportunities opening up. Why? Because the feeling of being loved isn't specific to one area. It's a state of consciousness that touches everything. Now, let me address something that will inevitably arise as you practice this. Doubt. That nagging voice that whispers, "Is this really working? Am I just fooling myself? What if nothing changes?" Most people think doubt is their enemy, something to fight against or suppress. But I want to reframe this completely for you. Doubt isn't your enemy. It's actually a teacher, a signal, a feedback mechanism showing you exactly where you still need to work. When doubt arises, it's simply indicating that you haven't fully assumed the state yet. It's pointing to areas where your consciousness hasn't completely shifted. Instead of getting frustrated with yourself or trying to suppress the doubt, use it constructively. Let it remind you to return to your assumption. When that voice says, "But what if it doesn't work?" simply acknowledge it and then gently redirect. Thank you for that reminder. Let me return to the feeling of the wish fulfilled right now. This changes your entire relationship with doubt. It stops being an obstacle and becomes a guide. Each time doubt surfaces, you're being given an opportunity to deepen your practice, to strengthen your assumption, to occupy the state more fully. And here's what happens over time. As your assumptions become more natural, as the feeling of fulfillment becomes more settled in your consciousness, doubt appears less and less frequently. Not because you fought it off, but because there's nothing left to doubt. When something feels completely natural and obvious to you, doubt has no foothold. The key is never to fight the doubt or berate yourself for having it. Fighting creates resistance, and resistance gives doubt more power. Instead, treat it gently, like you would a confused child, and simply guide your attention back to where you want it. In the state of the wish fulfilled, drop in the comments, "Doubt is my teacher," if you're seeing how even the obstacles in this practice can become tools for deeper transformation when approached with the right understanding. There's a principle that will save you enormous mental energy and actually accelerate your results, but it goes against everything your anxious mind wants to do. After you've planted your seed at night, after you've done your imaginal work before sleep, you need to rest from the work during the day. This doesn't mean you stop believing or suddenly return to your old consciousness. It means you trust that the subconscious is doing her job and you stop interfering with constant checking, worrying, and efforting. Think of it this way. After a farmer plants his seeds, he doesn't spend every waking hour hovering over the field, digging around the seeds, anxiously monitoring for signs of growth. He goes about his other business. He tends to different tasks. He rests, trusting that the natural process of growth is happening beneath the surface. His rest isn't laziness, it's faith. It's the confidence that once the seed is properly planted, the harvest is assured. All that's required is patience and not disturbing the process. Your nightly practice is the planting. Your daytime rest is the Sabbath, the sacred trust that allows creation to unfold. When you wake up and go about your day, you don't need to constantly think about your desire, constantly visualize, constantly try to maintain the feeling every single second. That would exhaust you and actually work against you, because it would reveal that you're still in a state of effort rather than a state of having. Instead, simply live your day without contradicting what you assumed the night before. If thoughts arise, neither cling to them nor push them away. Just let them pass like clouds. And if old negative states try to pull you back, if circumstances seem to argue against your assumption, simply remember quietly to yourself That is done. I fell asleep in the wish fulfilled. The subconscious is working on it now. I don't need to interfere. This isn't denial of reality. It's understanding that the current reality is simply yesterday's harvest, and you're planting tomorrow's crop tonight. Now, there's something profound to understand about the people in your life and how they fit into this entire framework. You might be wondering, what about other people? Don't they have their own free will? How can my assumption affect what they do? And this gets to one of the deepest truths in all of this work. There is no one to change but yourself. Others are not separate beings operating independently of your consciousness. They are reflections, mirrors showing you what you believe about them. When you change your assumption about someone, you're not manipulating them or overriding their will. You're changing what you're projecting and therefore changing what they can reflect back to you. That difficult colleague who's always hostile, they're showing you the hostility you're assuming about them. That partner who seems cold and distant, they're reflecting your belief that you're not truly loved. Change your assumption, and they must change their behavior. Not because you've controlled them, but because the mirror can only show what's placed before it. This is incredibly liberating when you truly grasp it. You stop trying to change people through argument, manipulation, or force. You simply change your consciousness about them, and they automatically adjust to match your new assumption. It happens naturally, effortlessly, inevitably. Write in the comments, "Others are my mirror," if you're understanding that every person in your life is showing you your own consciousness reflected back, and that changing them starts with changing what you assume about them. Let me share one more story that demonstrates just how powerfully this principle operates, even in situations that seem completely hopeless from a medical standpoint. There was a couple who had been trying to conceive for years without success. They'd consulted specialists, undergone treatments, tried everything modern medicine could offer. Finally, the verdict came. Conception was medically impossible. The tests showed it clearly. The specialists agreed unanimously they should accept this reality and consider other options. But they learned this principle and decided to apply it despite what every authority figure had told them. The woman began imagining herself holding her baby every night before sleep, feeling the weight in her arms, seeing the face looking up at her, hearing the coos and cries. The man imagined coming home from work and being greeted by his wife and child, feeling the joy and pride of fatherhood, experiencing the love of family. They practiced faithfully for months, occupying the state of being parents even though medical science declared it impossible. And then, against all probability, against every medical prediction, the woman conceived. 9 months later, she gave birth to a healthy child. The doctors had no explanation. Medical science had no category for what occurred. But the couple knew exactly what had happened. Years later, they now have multiple children, all conceived impossibly, and they continue practicing this law, not because they doubt it, but because they've proven it beyond any shadow of doubt in their own lives. Stories like this reveal something profound about the nature of reality itself and your place in it. You're not a powerless human begging an external universe for favors. You're not subject to circumstances that have authority over you. The consciousness within you, that awareness that knows it exists, that says, "I am," this is the creative power that ancient scriptures called God. Not some distant deity in the sky, but the very presence of creative authority dwelling in you as you. When you fall asleep in the wish fulfilled, you're not performing some psychological technique hoping it might work. You're exercising your birthright as consciousness itself. You're claiming the power that was always yours, but that you'd forgotten you possessed. You're remembering that you are the infinite creative being, temporarily wearing the costume of human limitation, playing the game of forgetting so you can have the ecstasy of remembering. This is why the two words, "I am," are so powerful. They're not just a way of identifying yourself. They're the name of the creative force itself. Every time you say, "I am tired," "I am poor," "I am alone," you're speaking creation into form. You're using the power that creates worlds to cement your current conditions. But when you say, "I am fulfilled," "I am abundant," "I am loved," and feel the truth of it, you're using that same power to create entirely new conditions. Now, as we come toward the close of this teaching, I want to make sure you understand what tonight represents. This isn't just another video you watched. This is an invitation to step into your power, to recognize who you truly are, to stop living as a victim of circumstances and start living as the creator of them. Put in the comments, "I am the creator," if you're ready to claim this truth and begin practicing it tonight, because what comes next is your call to action, your opportunity to start transforming your life, beginning with the very next time you close your eyes to sleep. So here we are at the end of our time together today, and if you've stayed with me through this entire journey, you've received something truly valuable. Not just information, but a complete framework for transforming your life starting tonight. You now understand the mechanics of consciousness, the power of sleep, the difference between wanting and having, and most importantly, you have a practical method you can use immediately. If this resonated with you, if something shifted inside as you listened, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to the channel. I create content like this regularly because I believe these principles need to be shared, taught, practiced. There's so much more to explore together. Deeper layers of this work, specific applications for different areas of life, advanced techniques for those who master the basics. By subscribing, you ensure you won't miss any of it, and you become part of a community of people who are actively practicing these principles rather than just thinking about them. And if you've made it all the way to this moment, leave a comment saying, "I received this message. Let me know this teaching landed with you." I read every comment, and there's something powerful about publicly declaring that you're ready to practice this work. It's your first act of assumption, your first statement of intention. Hit the like button as well if you feel this was time well spent. It helps this message reach others who need to hear it, people who are searching for exactly what you just received. Your like becomes part of the bridge that connects them to this understanding. Now, there's a video right here that goes even deeper into working with your subconscious mind and creating lasting change. It's the perfect continuation of what we've discussed today. Click and continue with me over there, because your transformation journey is just beginning, and I want to walk this path with you. Tonight, when you close your eyes, remember, you are not a victim of circumstances. You are consciousness itself, dreaming reality into existence. Sleep well, dream powerfully, and wake tomorrow to evidence of your creative authority. I'll see you in the next one.